Story 1. People are for it, but corporations and wealthy individuals who own politicians are against it. Studies have shown that what people in the United States want actually has no impact on what gets passed by Congress. Story 2. I would rather my cost from insurance actually be used by people that need it than the insurance company just pocketing it until I need it and then making me pay out of pocket anyway. Story 3. A 2014 study found that if 100% of Americans want a bill passed, there is a 30% chance Congress will pass it. And if 0% of Americans want a bill passed, there is a 30% chance Congress will pass it. Public opinion almost has no influence at all on laws in the United States. It is all money and corruption. Story 4. Healthcare is a business like anything else in the United States, and a single-payer system would impact the business model of these million-dollar healthcare companies. These companies lobby to keep things the way they are to maintain their profitability intact, so we see no change. Story 5. Does it work just fine everywhere else? I have always been pro-universal healthcare, but I hear Canadians and British people describe deficits in care. For example, acute care is great, but if you have an issue that requires diagnosis and long-term treatment, your risk level increases dramatically. Story 6. Government propaganda claims that we pay more for our healthcare because we have the best healthcare in the world, and that if we switch to universal healthcare, we will receive inferior service and face a greater burden on taxpayers. Additionally, it is labeled as socialism, and socialism is depicted as evil. Most Americans are not educated or interested in being educated, so they do not investigate further and just accept what corporations and the government tell them. Story 7. Because Republicans keep telling everyone that it is a radical idea and that it is evil socialism. Most politicians are beholden to big pharmaceutical companies and large corporations. You do not actually think Americans are smart, do you? Look at what is happening and how that was enabled, then do the math. Story 8. Most people in the United States are not against a universal healthcare system. Only big health insurance companies are against it, and it's hard for the population to do anything about it. Story 9. Because I don't want to trade my great healthcare for poor healthcare so that everyone can have poor healthcare. I grew up in Italy. I've seen socialized healthcare. Yes, everyone has it, but I wouldn't say it works fine, and actually, it's far from it. Story 10. Because most Americans have never traveled outside their home state, let alone the country, they believe the propaganda that all the people who live in those countries suffer. Story 11. They think it will cost way more than it actually does because they see those insane bills they get for like $50,000 to set a fractured arm and think it actually costs that much. Story 12. Most Americans want it, but the politicians who are supposed to represent our wants and needs are instead beholden to corporations that pay for their campaigns. Story 13. For most, you need to have a full-time corporate job in the United States to go to the doctor and not have it bankrupt your family. It seems to work out well for those in power, creating a certain element of fear. It supposedly makes everyone pull harder at the oars. Story 14. Americans want to exclusively be surrounded by sick and ignorant people. That's why they don't invest in education or healthcare, which ironically costs them more in the long run for both. But they hate money and love to be poor. Why else would they vote for Trump? Story 15. Propaganda from both Republicans and Democrats demonizes the idea of a public system as communism and socialism. Meanwhile, the private healthcare system injects a substantial amount of money into campaign finance to ensure that government representatives are influenced by those special interests. Story 16. The answer is that it does not, in fact, work just fine everywhere else. I am a Canadian living in the United States with a fair bit of extended family living back in Canada. I came to the United States in the first place because my father, a physician, was making such a poor wage in Canada it was a no-brainer to move and make far more money. This has happened with more and more doctors over the years and has a very negative impact on the quality of physicians you can find in Canada today. My family members still in Canada report extremely long waiting times for things like lab work and imaging even when dealing with very serious issues like cancer. My grandma had to come down to the United States and pay privately for a hip replacement, as there was a 2-year wait for her to have the procedure in Canada. Universal health care has a lot of pros, but it is intellectually dishonest to imply that it has no cons. If you are poor and have no insurance, It's better to live in Canada than the United States. If you are middle class and have decent health insurance, you are probably better off living in the United States, as you have much better access to much higher quality care. Story 17. After living in the United Kingdom, I promise it does not work fine. The National Health Service is a top-heavy organization that rewards people who eat, drink, and smoke themselves into ill health. The National Health Service does not reward people who strive for good health. As an American, it is galling to have 20% of my paycheck deducted every month to ensure the continuing bad behavior by stupid people. Story 18. Wait times are my concern. I know someone from the United Kingdom who married a United States citizen and moved to the United States. Her cancer was an aggressive sarcoma. She found out on Thursday, and by Monday her lower leg was amputated. She firmly believes if she had lived in the United Kingdom, she would have died waiting to be seen. Story 19. It works mostly just fine for minor things and younger people. Not so much when you're older. There are reasons Canadians with money come to the United States for testing so they don't have to wait months. Story 20. I would not say it works fine everywhere after having lived in Canada and multiple European Union countries. The actual medical care and options in the United States are superior if you have the necessary health insurance. This insurance is expensive when not through an employer, and still potentially expensive even with an employer, but it works well at the point of care. Essentially, it is not rationed. Meanwhile, public health care is rationed and there is less incentive for medical professionals to perform well, take additional patients, and provide customer satisfaction. The reason is that they are not paid by the patient, but by the state. That being said, I would like to see a hybrid system in America where there is a public system, paid for by taxes, that anyone can use even if the quality and waiting time might be longer, while preserving the current private system. I am not sure what implications this may have, but I would be willing to give it a try. Universal mixed with private, much like some European countries currently have in place. Currently, the big fear here is that if you lose your job, you lose your healthcare. Story 21. I've experienced universal healthcare. Let me tell you what I've observed. A 3 to 5 hour wait just to get in the door. Everyone with a minor issue or a bruise that doesn't look right is there ahead of you. Not to mention many people needing a doctor's note to skip work. You're there for a real issue but still have to wait. You finally see a doctor. He's been working all morning and has 5 minutes to decide if you have a legitimate reason to be there. It feels like a coin toss whether he believes you are genuinely sick or faking it. The doctor jots down a few notes, gives you a prescription for some painkillers, and tells you to come back tomorrow. If you come back, it's likely you really are sick. If you don't, you aren't. If you do come back, it's the same experience. 5 hours later, you see a doctor who shrugs and says the medication should have helped. He suggests trying this new medication and coming back if it gets worse. If you are lucky, you get better. If not, you end up in the emergency room and face the same wait times. Story 22. Preface. I am completely in favor of universal health care, but there are a couple of plausible arguments why some Americans are wary. 1. Patients in the United States get access to innovative treatments months, sometimes years before other countries. The minute after treatment is approved by the Food and Drug Administration, a doctor can prescribe it. With nationalized health insurance, drug manufacturers have to negotiate prices with national insurers for months and even years before the drug is available on the market and covered by national insurance. 2. Patients in the United States have a wider variety of treatment options available. Related to the reason above, sometimes drug companies do not want to invest the time and energy to negotiate prices, or maybe they think the price they will get is not worth the effort and may just choose not to market it in a country. A few cystic fibrosis drugs have been stuck in limbo in the United Kingdom for years because of this. 3. Wait times are arguably more within your control in the United States. If I wanted to see a specialist in the United States, I could call around, get an appointment tomorrow, and be booked for a scan next week. In some other countries, I may have to first queue for a general practitioner appointment for next week, then get put into another queue to see a specialist who would put me into another queue for an appointment with the radiologist. I stress, all the above points are valid only if you have amazing private insurance coverage and great job security. Assuming I had both, then I would without a doubt prefer the United States healthcare system if I had a life-threatening and fast-progressing illness like cancer. I would get access to the latest and greatest treatments as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the majority of Americans do not have great insurance coverage or job security. And so, they are stuck in a system where all the great advancements in medicine are happening at their doorstep but without being able to access them. Story 23. Claiming it works just fine is a controversial opinion. You can see in many other communities, such as those in Canada and other countries, that they have their own issues associated with the way it is implemented, including extraordinarily long waiting times. That being said, it is still far better than what the United States has. Story 24. Sadly, most people's interactions with the government are terrible. The average citizen is only likely to interact with the government when pulled over by the police, having to go to court, jury duty, taxes, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and similar situations. Do any of those work well? Most would argue no. I'm not saying universal healthcare wouldn't work, but I am saying it wouldn't work federally in America correctly with our levels of waste and corruption. The reason why I say this is because we already have federal universal health care for certain demographics like low-income individuals, pregnant women, the elderly, and veterans, and it doesn't work well along with all the other issues mentioned above that don't work well. Veterans frequently don't get the care they need, have to jump through hoops the private sector doesn't, or have much longer travel and wait times than the general public. Medicaid and Medicare are consistently abused for fraud on both the public and business ends. In addition, programs in countries that are the size of or smaller than a single state in America may not work when scaled up to the size of the United States population. Nor do I think the federal government should be responsible for implementing everything. Talk to anyone on Medicaid, Medicare, and the Veterans Administration about their experience getting the medication they need. Now, the federal government could require all states to provide health care for citizens. Having individual states tax and provide is a closer comparison to foreign systems and more likely to work as different states have different ways of doing things. The states are the laboratories of democracy and different states' needs are different, so maybe, just maybe, a top-down uniform approach for a country the size of the United States is kind of a misguided idea. Story 25. Because this is the United States, things tend to work okay unless the government is running it. The only thing worse than the present United States healthcare system is the federal government trying to improve it. These are the same people who think Ukraine started the current war with Russia, that denying a police helicopter sent to rescue a Boy Scout in New Mexico clearance to land on federal land holdings was okay, that putting kids in jail alone at the border is okay, that gerrymandering congressional districts is okay, that legislators having massive wealth despite making $200,000 a year is okay. These are the people you would put in charge of more than 330 million people's healthcare. No thanks. I cannot even stomach to vote for the two-party system in this country, let alone give them more responsibility, money, or power. Story 26. Except it doesn't work everywhere else. I have a friend who came to the United States to get cancer treatments because there was a 9-month wait in the United Kingdom. Plus, as a rule, anything our government touches goes up in price and down in quality. Story 27. Medicaid cost my brother his ability to walk and caused him brain damage. It is a long story, but the short version is that they forced him, he was nonverbal at the time because of some mental health issues brought on by extreme grief, to be transferred to a hospital with a history of abuse and neglect and prevented him from being transferred out of that hospital. They did not maintain his blood sugar, offer him counseling, shift him in his bed, or make any effort to actually perform physical therapy. All of those services were paid for. It took over 2 months to cajole the bureaucratic nightmare to allow us to take him to a better situation. By then, it was too late. This is with my sister, head of nursing at a different hospital, honestly making a heroic effort to navigate their obstacles for him. Meanwhile, in the same month, my dad's cardiologist made a bad call and misdiagnosed him. He was able to fire her, get a second opinion, and get a surgery that saved his life. All within about 9 days. My father would be dead if he had had to navigate the system my brother had to. I have no doubt in my mind about that. So when I say I do not trust the state to run healthcare, I have my reasons. Story 28. But it doesn't work just fine everywhere. Second, in universal healthcare, the patient has far less say in what is done. The problem here is that people who have insurance from work like their plans and do not want to give them up. nor should they have to. To effectively shut down 20 large companies also impacts thousands of people.